We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain your host, Mark Angelides, and we're joined by Liberty Nation's economics guru and editor, Mr. Andrew Moran. Now, Andrew, I've got you in this week because I believe there was some fracas north of the border, north of the US border, that involved a couple of political parties, wasn't there? With the Liberal Party prevailing.
They ran out of Timbits at the local Tim Hortons, so everyone was fighting to get their last bid on it.
So we had the election, and Mark Carney for the Liberals beat out Pierre Poilievre for the Conservatives in what was, up until about a month ago, was the Conservatives to lose. What happened?
Well, actually, it was right until before Christmas. They had a gigantic lead. Even some polls suggested that the Conservatives would have a supermajority. But once Trump, talked about annexing Canada, once Trudeau dropped out of the race, the Liberals made that their central focus, that we're going to stop Trump from making Canada the 51st state. We're going to protect our economy. We're going to elbows up, whatever this campaign.
I have no idea what that means. I keep seeing that.
I still don't know. I know Mark Carney was dancing with the elbows up during his rally. But yeah, so I mean, overall, you can blame Trump for what happened north of the border, and you can also blame Poilievre for not reacting to Trump quickly enough, which he admitted that was a mistake.
Well, he's out now. He actually didn't win his seat, or his riding, as they call it, up in Canada. But so Mark Carney was apparently, according to the majority, I think it was 44 to 42%, was the salve to Donald Trump's international ambitions to annex Canada, which I'm still not entirely sure he was serious about. But it does provide some strange insight that an off-the-cuff remark by Donald Trump could create such shockwaves in another country. It kind of makes me think that the politics in that country aren't taking themselves seriously enough.
Well, I wouldn't say it's off the cuff. I mean, he says it repeatedly over and over again, and his administration, they say, yeah, we are seriously interested in making Canada the 51st state. You look at the polling data, and there's a clear divide between the baby boomer voters and the younger voters. The baby boomers really took this seriously. I mean, you look at some of the polling data, and they say that Trump was their number one reason of why they voted for the Liberals. But the young voters, their biggest issues were housing affordability, cost of living, and the broader economy. So there's a clear divide. I wrote in my piece covering the election results, and there was a gentleman in Brantford, Ontario, and he was a Liberal voter, and he was an elderly man, and he gave the double bird to one of the photographers. And this quickly became a symbol of how baby boomers view the rest of the country, whereby they got theirs, they got a house that has just soared in value, and you're done now. They're set, and they're not going to pass on that wealth to the younger generation. And now the younger generation is stuck renting, which is also completely out of reach for a lot of people. They're stuck paying these massive costs of groceries because of the carbon tax. So overall, the last 10 years of the governing Liberals, they've made life completely unaffordable for the next generation.
So I guess there's often this divide between the older voters and the younger voters, and the older voters are looking for stability, and the younger voters are looking for something that will perhaps aid them on their trajectory through life. And we've seen that in many cases. So except for the Brexit argument, which was quite weird, because that was pretty much the opposite, because initially it was the older voters that were in favor of Brexit, which was the upending of all norms. And it was the younger ones who thought, I want to be part of this European ideal, this European Union ideal. And although, despite what you might read on X, support for Brexit is still very high. And a lot of that support is coming from the very young voters who really see the deterioration of these great European nations, and they see the deterioration in their own country, and they don't want it anymore. But they look to the US and they see that somebody's there upending all norms, Donald Trump specifically here, and they want a bit of that. They want some massive change. Now, on the subject of change, is Mark Carney a continuation of Justin Trudeau?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was the economic advisor to Trudeau for the last few years. He was the brainchild for a lot of this carbon tax. I mean, there was a report a couple of years ago that said that Trudeau wanted to remove the carbon tax off home heating bills, but Mark Carney was actually against that that policy proposal. So he's probably, I mean, he removed the consumer side of the carbon tax right now, which brought down gasoline prices, but he's still keeping the industrial side of it on there. He's a big climate change proponent. He's a lot of his policies, a lot of his speeches, he talked about it. He talked about universal basic income. You know, if you look at if you read some of the speeches, he talks about government's going to play a huge role in facilitating, let's say, home construction or advancing economic policies. I mean, really, the only good thing that he's proposed as different from the previous government and other governments, for that matter, is that he wants to remove interprovincial trade barriers. And that's of course a good idea. But the rest of everything else, I mean, the Carney Liberals are just like the last Trudeau. You look at the people he's surrounded with. All the Trudeau holdovers won their re-elections. You know, Melanie Joly, what's the guy from Nova Scotia? I forgot. Sean Fraser. Yeah, he won. All these people are still serving in government. Nothing changed except there's no Trudeau. Now it's just Carney and the rest of the Trudeau family or Trudeau government.
So no change at the top, really, then?
No, absolutely not. And I'll say one thing about the Brexit thing. One of the campaign marketing strategies for the Carney Liberals was that he managed the Brexit crisis as the Bank of England governor. But I'm still waiting for this Brexit crisis to unfold. I still don't see any negative prognostications that there were.
Well, that's one of those things. If the media and the banking sector were to admit that these doomsayings just didn't happen, it would be irrefutable evidence that they didn't understand what was happening in the country or the fiscal markets, which is, for them, I guess that's a bigger crisis, to not understand the very areas of competence they're supposed to inhabit. So you've got essentially Justin Trudeau 2.0, but on steroids, really, when it comes to climate taxes and essentially getting the government. It actually kind of worries me that he wants the government to be involved in the home building areas, because the first thing that springs to mind for me is, this is the Soviet era central planning committees. That what do? They had to make 10,000 decisions a day about things of which they knew nothing. And obviously what happened was, 100 million people died. Not all of them, of course, from the starvation or lack of living standards, but a good many certainly did. And I worry that when a government comes into power and they've got this ambition to centrally plan every aspect of life, if they're not ignoring lessons of the past.
But you do have to look at the numbers, though. So Party Liberals, they obtained a razor-thin minority. So they were, of course, a few seats shy of the 172 seat majority. But it's a very fragile government, considering that the Conservatives are just a few seats behind them, and then you have Bloc Québécois. Though they lost seats, they're really the kingmaker. I mean, the Bloc Québécois could really bring down the government or sustain the Liberals. The NDP, they were eradicated, which is, you're talking about youth earlier. That's a young people's party, because it's a very far left socialist New Democrats, but they were eviscerated in the last election. So if Carney wants to survive, he's really going to have to appeal to the separatist Bloc Québécois and Yves-François Blanchet.
And what does the Bloc want besides, obviously independence for Quebec? What does it want politically, and what do you think they're likely to be willing to offer in terms of short-term pocket support?
Well, the Bloc Québécois, they never released a plan heading into the election. Every political party releases the election plan. They never did, because their only goal in politics is to advance Québécois interests. Preserving the French language, ensuring Quebec industry is subsidized, ensuring they get transfer payments from the have-rich provinces. But overall, whatever Blanchet wants, Carney's going to have to seriously consider it and perhaps acquiesce to his demands just to ensure that the government stays intact.
Okay, last question. How do you think Carney's going to deal with Donald Trump's tariff extravaganza?
Okay, I'll give you an example here. There was a report recently in Canada that Mark Carney had a conversation with President Trump, and Mark Carney said, "You know what? I'm gonna dump Canadian holdings of U.S. government bonds." And I read that, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, Canada holds about what? Let's be liberal and say $100 billion. $100 billion of a $17 trillion treasury market. If I'm Trump, I'd laugh at that and say, yeah, good luck with that. And just for that threat, I'm going to raise tariffs to 50%. It's such a ridiculous threat. Canada does not have any advantage aside from energy, but that's another conversation. Sure. Has any advantage over the United States at this rate, especially considering how Canada has just avoided recession by the skin of its teeth. It tells elevated inflation, housing affordability is out of control, and the economy has been putrid for the last several years.
Well, let's see what happens in the next 4 years of Justin Trudeau's shadow reign. And we'll be back with Andrew Moran after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.